Welcome to another episode of the Pilot's Lounge, and welcome to Ground Control RC. If you hear wind chimes in the background, it is because the wind is just a howling outside. I have some really cool items on the table here, and I have a micro brushless aircraft that I had forgotten about. But first, I want to thank my patrons. You guys support me month after month after month, and I absolutely am humbled by your support. And I hope you've enjoyed some of the premiere videos that I've been publishing lately. I want to thank my subscribers on the YouTube channel, and I always love getting comments from you guys. Some of them are really funny, some of them are very informative, but I always enjoy getting feedback from you guys. Thanks for those of you who follow us on Facebook. In case you don't know, any type of information that doesn't require a video or would just require a very short video segment, I publish that information on our Facebook page. It's easier for me to do that. So, you know, things like aircraft plans and setup files for aircraft and OpenTX model files for aircraft, those will all be published on the Facebook page, as well as information on projects that I have ongoing, projects that are coming up, what's in the pipe, if I've received something new that I'm getting ready to review. I post all that information on our Facebook page. And thank you so much, those of you who are using our affiliate links when you purchase one of the products that I review. I put links to those in the show notes. I have also started providing a link for subscribing and following us on Facebook in the comments section of the video, along with links to the aircraft or components there. It doesn't cost you anything to use that link, but it lets the vendor know that you're purchasing that based on our review and testing, and so they can see that sending us items for review are resulting in some sales for them, assuming that it's a product that I promote, not one that I reject. But so thank you for that. That's awesome. It helps us, do projects, buy components, like some of the components up here. New aircraft to test. I purchased and tested a lot of sub 250 gram microplanes lately, which is why I have this one on the table, to give you guys some really good options for really great flying planes that don't cost a lot of money, that are sub 250 gram and brushless. So, and I've got one more in mind that I would like to check out. All right, so I want to start off with the rejects, and then we'll talk about the stuff that's on the table. But my review rejects, I asked in the last episode if people would be interested in also seeing the items that just didn't, I just didn't think they were good enough to promote. They weren't good enough for me to tell you, yeah, this is a great product, you should buy it. There's been quite a few over the past year. Some of them are terrible, and I will let you know that when they're terrible. Some of them had component issues, electronic issues. Some of them were just, I felt, average flying aircraft or average quality components, and so I thought there were better options out there. So the rejects doesn't mean that they were absolutely terrible, even though there are some in the list, but I'll let you know which ones those are. Okay, so rather than having all those planes on the table, and some of those planes I don't have anymore because I retired them, but I will put up a picture of them on the screen as I'm talking about them. Okay, so the first review reject that I have on my list, these aren't necessarily in order in which they were reviewed, is the Aeros T-33 EDF jet. The specified CG, the information that was in the manual, was so far off what you needed to get that thing to fly. That was the first strike against Aeros RC on that jet. And if you guys watched the maiden launch of that jet, you saw that I set it up precisely how they stated in the manual. And that aircraft was so tail heavy, using their specified CG and using their recommended LiPo, that I couldn't even keep it in the air. And I ended up crashing it on the maiden launch. And that required a repair. So, and then when I got the CG sorted out on it, and finally got it in the air and had it flying fairly well until I started testing, you know, some of the aerobatics with it. And one thing that I like to do with my aircraft is I like to go vertical with them and wait until they're almost at stall speed, roll them over and pull through on a split S maneuver. Well, I did that with the T-33. And as the T-33 was just, you know, reaching the apex and starting to fall through, it went into a flat spin. And the only thing that saved it was the gyro. I had it in manual mode, and when it went into a flat spin, I couldn't recover from it. I didn't have a tremendous amount of altitude, so I switched the gyro into parachute mode, and that saved it. But it also has that terrible stall tendency, and so I definitely told you guys on that aircraft that was a pass. That I would, if I had to do it over again, I would not have purchased that EDF jet. Okay, so that's the Aeros T-33. The next one up was the first EDF jet I ever purchased, and if I hadn't had another one on the way, it probably would have scared me off of EDF jets. But that was the Freewing F-86 64mm EDF jet. It was so low powered and the EDF unit was so starved for air, I could not get it in the air on a 3S LiPo at full throttle. It would just fall out of the air every time that I hand launched it. And I thought maybe it was my altitude, because the altitude that I fly at is well over a mile up above sea level. And so I thought maybe that was really affecting the EDF jets, and it does. But I did some research after I was having so many problems, and there were a lot of other people that were having the same problem with the inadequate power on that jet that were flying close to sea level. So I knew that wasn't the only reason that I was having issues. So I had to do a lot of tweaking and some modification on the airframe to get that plane flying halfway decent. And I would say where I have it now, it's just an average flying aircraft. And so if I had to do it over again, I would not purchase that aircraft, and I don't recommend purchase of that aircraft. Okay, so, and the next one, the next item, the next aircraft that was an actual reject because it was so bad was the XK-J3 Cub. Do you guys remember the XK-J3 Cub, the little yellow plane? Well, they had mixed in so much rudder with the ailerons in that gyro. And the plane is heavy for its size, so it doesn't have great slow flight capability. It has pretty heavy wing loading. Plus the fact that it was extremely tail heavy right out of the box. It was so susceptible to tip stalls, it was ridiculous. Now I did eventually get that plane flying pretty well. And I put a different power system in it as well, and it was fairly aerobatic. It still did not have good slow flight capability, but I did solve the tip stall issue with it. But there was just so much work that was required for that plane to get it to fly halfway decent. I couldn't recommend that one either, so the XK-J3 Cub was another reject. The next aircraft on the list, the Eachine Mini Wing Dragon. And I don't know, you know, that's a proven airframe. If you look at that Mini Wing Dragon, that is a proven airframe. That should have been a really nice flying plane. But that was another plane that was extremely tail heavy right from the get-go. It had an inadequate amount of power even for a cruiser. Mine came with a bad motor. It also seemed to have gyro issues, ESC issues on the board. I ended up replacing the board on it with the a board I had left from my old WL Toys F949, little receiver brick, no gyro, it was just manual mode. I replaced the stock 1020 motor with just a little $2 generic motor that I had, put a little larger prop on it, put some ballast weight in the nose, and then I had it flying pretty well. But that's a lot of work to get a little plane like that flying really well. So that was another one of my rejects. Okay, the next aircraft on the list that didn't make the cut was the Flybear F-35 3-channel park jet, and I had such high hopes for that Flybear aircraft. I had four different Flybear aircraft that were, you know, the 2-channel, you know, where they've had double motors and they use differential thrust for yaw, and you just ascend and descend using the throttle. I think those are great little trainer planes for kids, and I've had a lot of fun flying their Red Baron, their SU-35 that I converted to brushless. There was another one that didn't make the cut, but I was really excited because it was the first Flybear aircraft that was 3-channel instead of just 2-channel. But that aircraft had so many problems with the gyro. I don't know what was going on with it. But one minute you'd be flying along level, and then all of a sudden it would just dive down toward the ground without any input on the sticks. So I couldn't recommend that aircraft, which is a shame. It was a nice looking little airframe, but just some weird behavior out of the gyro. I don't know what it is with some of these gyro systems that these manufacturers come up with, but some of them are absolutely fantastic and some of them are just terrible. You know, the gyro in that was just terrible. The XK-A220 Warhawk. Such a cool looking little plane, man. I love the paint scheme on it. You know, it's such a nice looking little airframe. And I just published not too long ago my last flights with that plane because it's definitely getting retired. But it was another deal where, you know, XK, I don't know what's going on with XK. I've never understood XK. They always seem to do something silly with their gyros. They can never seem to just, you know, put a gyro in it that does auto leveling, you know, restricts the roll axis and the pitch axis, and then have an intermediate mode. They always put in this thing called a 3D mode, which everything that I've flown of theirs in 3D mode has some gyro input or restriction on it. I've never flown one of their planes that had a full manual mode on it. But on this plane, they decided to mix in elevator with the throttle. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant. You know, I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what they were thinking. If they hadn't done that, it probably would have been a nice flying little aircraft. But it was one of those aircraft where it wasn't terrible. It did have some bad behavior because of the mixing of the elevator in with the throttle. And so, you know, I told you guys with that one, I think there are better options out there. You know, I mean, would I buy it? No, I would not buy it. So, E-Sheen E130 Micro Heli. This was another micro helicopter that had an aberrant behavior in it, kind of like the XK-220 Warhawk, you know, where I don't know if they messed up the barometer on it or what was going on, but everyone that I saw perform a review of that micro helicopter had the same issue that I had, where you would be flying along just fine and all of a sudden it would stop and it would drop its tail. And you never knew when it was going to do that. And so I couldn't recommend that micro helicopter, which was a shame because it had plenty of power for its size. And I thought, man, this is going to make an excellent little helicopter that would be able to, you'd be able to FPV. You know, I was real excited about that. And I did everything that I could think of to try and fix that issue. but it looked like it's a gyro issue. I don't know if it was related to the barometer, but that would be my guess, because the barometer works as like an altitude hold type thing, and it almost seemed like if you had the nose dumped over a little bit too far, or even if you were in fairly level flight but you were flying fast, all of a sudden it would stop and it would drop that tail. So I could not recommend that micro helicopter. And the final one that I have on the list is another Flybear, unfortunately. And that was the P38. And that was another one of those, if I remember correctly, it was a 3-channel. It had the dual motor that provided the yaw with differential thrust, but it also had an elevator on it. And if I remember correctly, that one was pretty tail heavy right from the get-go. And the tail booms were warped when I received it. And so I ended up having to put in carbon slats in it, or carbon rod in the booms to straighten them out. And then the booms had this crazy curvature to them. I don't know if the real P38 has that curvature to them, but you couldn't get the elevator situated to where it wouldn't keep pushing the nose up. Now I finally got the booms pulled down, and I got them straightened out to where I could fly it fairly well. But then I had a weak motor on one side, and so I think on the left side the motor was weak. If I remember correctly, it would turn really well to the left, but it would barely turn to the right. So not only did I have some airframe issues with that one, but I had some motor issues with it as well. And so I couldn't recommend it either. And it was a nice looking little airframe. It was a shame. That was another one of those little aircraft that I was really looking forward to putting in the air and flying around. I thought it was going to be a really great little plane, but it just didn't turn out to be the case. Okay, so that concludes my list of aircraft that I've reviewed over the past year that I either said it's terrible, I wouldn't buy it, or I stated that there were better options out there, one of the two. Okay, so the projects that I have ongoing right now, the Aeros Pioneer, I should have published my test flight on that by now, where I extended the ailerons because I have such a lethargic roll rate on it. That seems to be another one of those deals where the manufacturer of the aircraft, for one thing, they decided rather than using a dual servo setup for the ailerons to use a single one. And then the rigging that they used on it didn't provide enough movement. So not only were the ailerons pushed in where the flaps normally would be, instead of putting the ailerons on the outer part of the wing so it would have good roll authority, they put them on the inside where the flaps would be, and then on top of that they didn't provide enough movement of the ailerons to get a good roll rate with it. Now the extension of the ailerons, because I increased the surface area by 48%, it did improve the roll rate, but it's nowhere near where I would want it to be. So as soon as I have time, that's on my project list. I'm going to be removing the main wing. I'm going to be removing that single aileron servo. I'm going to be removing the rigging. I'm going to put control horns on the ailerons and micro servos underneath the wing. Use Y cable to tie it together. So I should be able to use the stock board and gyro that comes with it. But then it should have very good roll authority, what I would like to have. And then I think that will be a near perfect aircraft. As it is, it's an exceptional flying aircraft. But the weak spot is the roll rate on it. So I want to get it as perfect as I can. So that's on my project list. Eachine Mini P47, the 500 millimeter little brushed motor and gearbox plane. It's a really nice airframe. It's a very stable airframe. It has very good flight characteristics, and since it's a 500 millimeter wingspan instead of that little 400 millimeter wingspan, it has very good slow flight capability and has light wing loading. So I think that that plane is a good candidate for a 2S brushless power system. So I am planning on converting that plane over to a 2S brushless power system. That might be the only plane that I have time to convert this year, but I do want to try and convert that one, and we'll see how that works out. I want it to have enough power to be able to pull very wide loops, to have good vertical split S maneuvers, nice stall climbs with stall turns. You know how I like to fly if you watched my videos. And so I think that's a very good candidate for it if the project is a success. I think that will be an exceptional flying little brushless micro plane, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. The Aeros T-33 EDF jet, I am going to attempt to get that in the air one more time. I'm either going to put skids on it or more robust landing gear than what I had on it. That will definitely be a plane that I retire, but I would like to go out and fly it a few more times before I do that. So hopefully I'll have that back in the air shortly, but it's definitely not a keeper. I can tell you that right now. The Z84 wing is finally getting a power system upgrade. That was the very first fixed wing I ever purchased, and it is still flying today, which is a testament to its durability. But the stock power system, it's a 2208 2600 kV motor, an XXD. It's been a very good motor, and I haven't had any problems with it. I think they overpropped it with this. I have the plug-and-play version of the Z84, and it came stock with a 50/50 APC style prop. And the 2208 2600 kV motor just didn't quite have the torque to spin that prop fast enough. So I replaced that prop with an RC Timer 6x3 high efficiency sport prop, composite prop. It's also sold under the brands of EMP, KMP. I've provided lots of links to those props, but once I put that on that motor instead of that 5x5 APC style prop, it greatly improved the performance of that wing and also extended the flight time on it because it wasn't pulling as many amps. It was providing more thrust and pulling fewer amps at the same time. So I think they chose the wrong prop for it, but I've just had the stock motor and ESC on there for as long as I've had it. And so now that I've got those Beta FPV, the motors that they sent me, the 2004 3000 kV motors, I've got to modify the motor mount on it. I've already designed the templates and everything for the new motor mount. But I'm going to put one of those on there, and I'm going to start flying it with a 4S LiPo because I don't know if the stock motor is rated for a 4S, probably not. I know the ESC that it came with was not rated for a 4S. So I'm replacing the motor and the ESC in that Z84 wing. And looking at the thrust numbers with that HQ 5x3 T-mount prop on that Beta FPV motor, it should give me a 2.2 to a 2.3 to 1 thrust to weight ratio on the Z84 wing. So it'll probably be considerably faster with that powered system set up on a 4S LiPo, and it will have unlimited vertical. So I can't wait to get that on there and get that tested. Because I wanted to test one of the Beta FPV motors on a 4S LiPo, not just on a 3S LiPo. So that will give me the opportunity to put a better power system on the Z84 wing and test that other Beta FPV motor on a 4S at the same time. So watch for that. That's going to be awesome. The E-Sheen Mobula Wing Thrust Angle Adjustment. I should have published that video by now. But all I did was I added a 1mm plastic piece of plastic to the bottom of that plywood motor mount to just lessen that thrust angle a little bit. I think that the thrust angle on it was too aggressive. When I go to full throttle, it kind of pushes the nose down. So I went back out and I tested that after I made that modification, and it looks like that took care of it. Going full throttle with it, it seems to hold its line very, very well. So I'm happy with that. I still need to test it on 4S. I'm thinking of making a modification, a significant modification to the Mobula wing, if it works out. You know, well, you guys will see it whether it works out or whether it doesn't work out. But before I put it back in the air again, I want to perform this modification to this wing. I don't want to tell you what it is. You'll see it when it's finished, if I can get it worked out. But it's going to look cool, even if it doesn't fly well. It should look pretty cool. So anyway, I have that in the pipeline. I've been publishing more of my setup files and OpenTX model files. I've also been adding the OpenTX model file along with an image file that you can use in transmitters like the RadioMaster TX16S, you know, putting it into a zip file with the OpenTX model file. So those I'm posting on our Facebook page whenever I update, whenever I get something better tuned, and I update the setup file or the OpenTX model file, or as I'm reviewing and testing these new planes that I've been getting in and doing reviews of. As soon as I get them flying precisely the way I want, I publish my setup file on the Facebook page, which gives you information like the throttle setting for hand launching it, the amount of deflection on the control surfaces where I have my CG, even where all the linkage is attached to the servo arms and to the control horns on the control surfaces, my amount of dual rate, my amount of expo, all that information. So even if you don't have an OpenTX transmitter to import the OpenTX model file, or if you just don't want to download and import the OpenTX model file, the setup file that I provide should give you all the information to get the airplane set up, balanced, and flying precisely the way that you see it in the video when I'm flying it. So as I get more of those done, I'll be publishing more of those on our Facebook page. All right, so time for the cool components that I have here on my table. You know that I converted that eSheen 50mm EDF jet kit into a pusher motor and prop instead of an EDF. And you also know, if you've watched that I had an intermittent servo from the time that I first launched it. And wouldn't you know, it just happened to be the servo that was wired for reverse movement. It had to be that one, didn't it? So I replaced that servo, and I wanted to use the split elevators, the two servos for the split elevators on a Y cable. Well, the only way that I could do that is if I could reverse the direction of that servo that I just put in there, because it was just a standard servo. It wasn't a reversing servo. So I got online and I searched, and I found a servo reverser made by a company called Hobby Unlimited. I ordered 4 of these because I have 2 of the eSheen F-16 EDF jets and the kit that I have. So I know I'm going to need at least 3 of these in the future. So I ordered 4 of them. And I put it in there, in my kit, after I replaced the servo. I connected it, you know, between that one servo I need reversed and the on the Y cable, and it worked like a charm. I had the same amount of movement, I had the same amount of resolution. This one that I purchased, I'll have a link to, is rated for up to 2 amps. So I don't think I have any servos on any of my planes that require even close to 2 amps of power. So unless you have something very large like a scale plane with a very high torque, with high torque servos in it, these will work absolutely fine. They do also have ones, I think, that are up to 5 amps of power for planes that use those really high torque servos. So, but these work like a charm. When I need more of them, I'll be ordering these again. If I ordered these from a vendor, I think it was on eBay, but the link will be in the show notes. But awesome little deals. They're very compact, they're very light, and it works like a charm. So I'm glad that I found these. The first time I've ever had to use a servo signal reverser. And it works. I got my plane, I got that jet back in the air with that. All right, I received 2 brush to brushless signal modules. And so these modules were provided to Ground Control RC courtesy of Bauer Electronics. So I want to thank them for sending this for testing and review. I will provide a link where you can purchase these in the show notes, because I know I've seen it demonstrated with the V761 board, so I know it works flawlessly with that board. And if I can get it to work with this board that is in the P47, I will definitely let everybody know, because this is going to be a game changer for making brushless conversions of these V761 protocol boards, and hopefully that one as well. So it's going to make a brushless conversion so much easier, guys. Just being able to wire up to this module and add a brushless ESC and a motor. I won't have to change out the board. I don't have to change out the servos. That is going to be a huge time saver. So I hope they develop even more of these. I think that is going to be absolutely fantastic. So I want to thank them again for sending this for review. Crossover RX. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Crossover RX, but I have used their receivers in the past, and they sent me, and this is courtesy of Crossover RX for Ground Control RC for review and testing. They sent me a DSM2 DSMX SBUS receiver. It doesn't look like it comes with the cable to attach, but you need to attach a cable to it to connect to your flight controller or gyro. And I have been testing a lot of SBUS receivers lately since I have been purchasing the BIME A gyros, the BIME D gyro. I still have to test the Hobby Eagle gyros that I purchased to test and review. I think I'm going to put those in a couple of my larger planes. But I want to thank them for sending this SBUS receiver. It's a diversity antenna receiver. It's tiny, it's compact, it's lightweight. It's going to work with the BIME A or the BIME D gyro. So I will be attaching the wires to this and testing that out. They sent me, this is the AR3207G-D, and the D stands for DSM2 DSMX. And this is a 7-channel micro receiver that is designed for 2S to 3S brushless system. It has a built-in brushless ESC. Not only that, but it has their built-in 3-axis gyro system on this. So you also have a 3-axis gyro with it, but you can use it has a 2S 7-amp brushless ESC, or you can use a 3S with it for 5 amps worth of power. My plan for this receiver is to put it in a microplane and use it with a 2S brushless motor. So this is another avenue for being able to convert some of these microplanes to brushless planes. And since this one has a built-in gyro, if you want a gyro, then this one has a built-in 3-axis gyro. And I think that, if I remember correctly, I looked at the documentation yesterday, and it comes with, I think that you set it up on channel 5, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll have a link to these in the show notes as well. You do have to solder either the wires to the receiver, or they provide a socket and cable here that you can solder to it. So I am probably going to solder the socket to the board and then use the provided cable and put whatever connector on the end of it that I want. But awesome. They also sent the configuration tool for this. So it has a cable that connects to the socket at the end of the board, so that you can connect it to I think it requires a Windows system. I brought up the interface on my Linux computer yesterday and it loaded just fine in the mono runtime. So the interface loaded up just fine, but you would have to tweak some settings on your Linux system so that it can recognize the COM port. But so I'll probably just pull out a Windows virtual machine or my old Windows system. But it has software that you can download, connect this to a USB port, connect it to your receiver, and you can go into the software and you can set it up for the gyro for the type of plane, you know, whether it's a V-tail, a delta, a traditional plane, whatever, so that you can configure the gyro for the type of plane you're using. You can set up the sensitivity of the gyros, to how aggressive the gyro is in leveling the plane. So a lot of cool features, and it's a very inexpensive tool. It's a fairly inexpensive receiver for what you get, as well as the SBUS receiver. So I will have links to all those in the show notes, and I will be performing testing and review on these as soon as I can set aside time to do so. So those are the cool components that I've gotten. And one of the other components that I want to talk about, I wanted to wait until I tested a few of them. I've got a lot. I think I've purchased about a dozen of the MicroRX 6-channel PWM receivers, DSM2, DSMX. And I absolutely love those receivers. They're small, they're lightweight, they're compact for a 6-channel receiver. I'll provide links to those as well. They're diversity, they have long antennas on them, which I really like because it's easier to place the antennas away from the electronics. It doesn't require RF frequency tuning, which I also like. And one of the things I really love about those, and they've been completely reliable. I haven't had a single problem with any of the ones I've used so far. I've used several of them. They have a little button on the side of the receiver. So right after you bind up to it, center your sticks, make sure your throttle's at 0. Has a little button on the side of the receiver you can push, and it records all the current settings on your throttle and on your control surfaces for your failsafe. And I've tested every one of them after I set that, and the failsafe has worked flawlessly every single time. It'll show a little green LED light underneath the board when the failsafe has been set, so that you know that the programming has been saved for your failsafe. Works like a charm. I wish all receivers had a little button on them where you could just set your failsafe. Makes it so fast and so easy, and it works every single time. So I wanted to let you guys know about that. Those are fairly inexpensive receivers, and they're pretty high quality from what I can see so far, and very simple to set up. I like those kind of components that are easy to set up like that. Okay, so microplanes. I forgot about my little tiny wing 450. This is an awesome flying little micro wing. I've had it forever and a day. I stored it away. I haven't flown it in a very long time, but this is another option for a sub 250 gram brushless aircraft that is an exceptional flying little wing. It's extremely lightweight. Now, I removed the gyro board on mine, the receiver gyro board on mine. I put in just a standard receiver and an external brushless ESC, and because I found that the stock brushless ESC that was built onto the board did not drive the motor all that well. This thing flies like it has an additional 25% of thrust now after replacing the stock board with ESC. But you could buy these airframes. You could buy these airframes in a 2-pack and put your own electronics in them, which is what I would do. But it's a great little offering for another sub 250 gram brushless aircraft. And it's just an absolute blast to fly. It's very aerobatic, of course, like all wings. It's extremely maneuverable. And it doesn't have the best slow flight capability because it is kind of heavy for its size. But the all-up weight on this one with a 2S 450 milliamp hour, and I think it's a 20C lipos that I use in it. My all-up weight is 96, I think, 0.8 grams. I also removed the LED lights from it since I didn't have the gyro in it anymore. So the stock configuration with the LED lights might be somewhere around 100 grams, but 100 grams, you know, it's got enough power to do some very wide loops, do split S maneuvers. It very fast roll rate on it. It's just an absolute blast to fly. And if you buy the plug and fly version, and they're still selling this in some places, even though it's been out for a very long time, it has a gyro in it, and it also has full manual mode. So you get the best of both if you want to get the plug and fly version with the built-in gyro. And it does have adequate power with the stock ESC, but I found that my external ESC drives this motor much, much better. So this gives you yet another option for an excellent flying sub 250 gram brushless aircraft. So I think that's 5 now. 5 different options that I've given you for aircraft that are pretty inexpensive. So I'm looking at one more sub 250 gram brushless aircraft. It's another category of aircraft that I've been looking at. And I don't know yet if I'm going to pull the trigger on it or not. Let me know if you guys are interested in it. But it is the OMP Hobby, the Ohio Model Products S720 Sport Plane. I believe that is made out of EPP foam. There is OpenTX support for binding to the receiver. Comes as a ready to fly, but having the option, I like buying things where I have the option of using my hobby grade transmitter to fly it, because that's what I like to do. I don't like using the toy transmitters. The only transmitter that a ready to fly transmitter that I've had so far that I've been really happy with was the one that came with the Arrows Pioneer. That is a high quality, ready to fly transmitter, and I didn't have any complaints about it other than that incessant beeping that they put on there. But the OMP Hobby 720 Sport Plane, the only thing that I don't like about it is it's got the little proprietary hub. I think it takes a 4mm prop with the spinner that uses a screw in the center to mount it. I think that you could buy props that either buy props that have a 4mm diameter hub that you could use on that plane without having to buy them, from them. I think the Arrows Pioneer is the same way. Or you get a standard prop that has a 5mm hub with a 1mm, with a spacer that cuts it down to 4mm. And then I think you would be able to use a stock prop with those just fine without having to spend much money for additional props. Now, their props aren't badly priced. I think they're $250, $249, something like that for a prop. So if I order the plane, I'll make sure that I order a spare prop with it at the same time. I think it's a 2S brushless system. It looks like a well-built plane. And the fact that I can fly it with my hobby grade transmitter makes it more attractive. It's fairly inexpensive for what you get as far as a ready to fly brushless plane, and it's a sport plane. So if you guys are interested in seeing a review of that plane, let me know. Probably be a month before I can pull the trigger on it. But that was the other brushless plane that I was looking at possibly doing a review of. I haven't quite made up my mind on it yet. But okay, so in the pipe, this is going longer than I anticipated. So in the pipe, this is the last segment. The RadioLink Bind D gyro, I'm going to put it in my DIY F22 Micro, what I found with the BIMD, I did do a test flight with it in the Eachine Mobula wing. But wings are so maneuverable. It doesn't take much movement on the control surfaces to get dramatic movement in the wing, you know, in the roll and the pitch axis. Control surfaces do not have to have much movement at all. What I found with the BIMD gyro is I don't think it's going to work very well in a wing because you have so little movement, and I was getting oscillations from it like crazy. I think that the BIMD gyro has to be put in an aircraft that has much more significant control surface movement than a wing has in it. I think that's going to work in a park jet, not in a wing. So I'm going to test that again in that GFS DIY F22 Micro because it does have significant movement in the control surfaces. It's Elevon only. So we'll see how it works out in that plane, but I was not happy with it in a wing. I love the BIMA gyros. They have worked flawless in everything I've put them in so far. But the BIMD is going to be, I think it's going to be a little temperamental on what you can put it in. But we'll find out. The RadioLink R8 FM 8-channel SBUS PPM receiver, and the RadioLink T8 FB TX, and the BIM gyro. So I have yet to test all that out yet, but I will be testing that out. I was wanting to use that with the BIMD. So if the BIMD works fine in my DIY park jet, then what I want to do is install their SBUS receiver and use their transmitter so that the entire control chain is all RadioLink stuff to see how well that all works together. Because so far I have really liked the RadioLink components. It's a nice little, I would say, entry-level hobby-grade transmitter. The SBUS receivers are nice, compact receivers, and I love their gyros. So we'll see how all of that works together. I still have to do the testing and review of the Hobby Eagle A3 Pro version 2 gyro. I think that I would like to put that in one of my larger planes. I'm thinking about putting it in maybe my Fun Cub. I've got some modifications I want to do to the Fun Cub. So I think that once I get the modifications in the Fun Cub, get it flying exactly the way I want again, I think then I'll put one of the Hobby Eagle gyros in it and see how well it works in the Fun Cub. Volitex Phoenix S. I still have not had a chance to put my Phoenix S together. I have all the components. I just haven't had the time to sit down. It's been very low priority on my list. I've had much higher priority things I've had to get to. I will eventually get to it. The WFly ET16 transmitter, the MG216 RF module, and receivers. It's a crossfire module and receiver. I did test that in the OpenTX transmitter, but I was getting RSSI warnings on it. I think that the firmware on the module and the receiver need to be updated. I haven't had a chance to update the firmware on those two components yet. So I will update those components and then test them in the RadioMaster TX16S again to see that if everything is working correct, and then I'll let you know what version of the firmware you need if you're wanting to use it in the OpenTX transmitter as opposed to the WFly ET16 transmitter. Testing of the brush to brushless modules. I'm going to be cutting the herd again, culling the herd again on my aircraft. I think in the next year and a half, I'm getting much closer. The only aircraft I will have in my inventory are all exceptional flying aircraft. So you will start seeing a lot of last flight videos being published. You just saw one not too long ago on the XK-A220 Warhawk. Okay, that one is getting culled from the herd. I'm going to put a few more flights on the Arrows T-33 EDF jet. It's going to get culled from the herd. There are quite a few other airframes that are going to be getting culled from the herd, the Freewing F-86. So look for some last flight videos, one last time in the sky before I put them out to pasture. So I'm going to be putting a list of my favorite planes together. You guys just saw all my rejects. Now I'm going to be putting together a list of all of my favorite planes, all the planes that I consider keepers, that if anything happened to them, I would want to replace them. Okay, that's how much I like these aircraft. And they vary. You know, some of them are micros, some of them are minis, some of them are larger planes. But they're all keepers to me, and all different types of planes. So stay tuned for that. Sorry the segment went so long. I didn't plan on it for being so long. It's only been a little over a month, I think, since the last episode. There's been so much going on here. I wanted to get another one produced. That was a lot of material to go over. I want to thank Bauer Electronics again for sending the modules. I want to thank Crossover RX for sending the receivers and the configuration tool. I want to thank again Beta FPV for sending those fantastic little motors for review. They're awesome. I really, really like them. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.